On a calm Saturday evening in October 1978, a 20-year-old pilot named Frederick Valentich took off from Moorabbin Airport just outside of Melbourne. He was flying a rented Cessna 182 en route to King Island, a remote speck of land in the middle of the Bass Strait. He followed a correct flight plan, followed protocol, and made all the right radio calls. But as he neared the coast, something changed. Valentich reported seeing another aircraft nearby, one he couldn't identify. Over the next 6 minutes, his transmissions grew increasingly strained. He described bright lights and strange movements, something hovering above him. And then he just vanished into thin air, never to be seen or heard from again. There were no distress signals, no emergency survival beacon. Basically, no conclusive debris was ever found. His final words to air traffic control were simple, but haunting. "It's not an aircraft." More than 4 decades have passed since that night, but the mystery has never been resolved. And behind the speculation lies a set of hard facts. A flight plan, a transcript, and a void where Valentich simply disappeared. Frederick had been flying for just over a year. He held a Class 4 instrument rating and had logged around 150 hours of flight time. Those who knew him described him as being pretty serious about aviation, young but meticulous. On October 21st, he arrived at Southern Air Services and lodged his flight plan at 5:20 p.m. The sun was due to set just before 6:50 p.m. that night. He had just enough time to make the 235-kilometre journey across the Bass Strait before dark, as long as he left on schedule. The thing is, he didn't. It wasn't until 6:19 p.m. that Fred finally lifted off from Moorabbin in his Cessna 182L, registration Delta Sierra Juliet. He was alone in the cockpit, flying under visual flight rules. His destination was King Island, where he said he'd planned to pick up friends and return later that evening. He even made sure to pack 4 life jackets. But the weird thing was that no one was there waiting for him on the island, and no arrangements had been made for passengers or accommodation. Another crucial detail that is often overlooked is that no runway lighting was requested in the flight plan at King Island, meaning Fred wouldn't be able to land safely at night. By around 7 p.m, he was over Cape Otway, the last point of land before open sea. From there, his plan was simple. Turn south, maintain an altitude of 4,500 feet and head towards the island's non-directional beacon. A flight of just under 30 minutes. At 7:06 p.m, he radioed Melbourne Flight Service. The call was routine, and Valentich asked if there was any known traffic below 5,000 feet, and the controller told him there wasn't. Then he said he could see something. 4 bright lights moving fast. He couldn't tell what it was. That was the beginning of the final transmission. At first, the tone of Frederick's voice was steady. He told the controller he was observing a large aircraft with 4 bright lights moving fast beneath him. When asked to identify it, he said it resembled landing lights, but he couldn't be sure. Moments later, he reported the object had flown directly over the top of him. He described it as long in shape, travelling at speeds he couldn't estimate. Then he asked whether there were any military aircraft operating in the area. The controller again confirmed. No known traffic. Valentich said the object was now approaching him from the east. A pause followed. Then his voice returned. This time it was different. He said, "It's playing some sort of game, flying over me 2-3 times at speeds I could not identify." The controller asked for his altitude. Valentich replied, 4500. That placed him at 4,500 feet, still well above the minimum safety height for the crossing. But when asked again to describe the object, his response became more fragmented. "It's not an aircraft, it's long. It's got a green light, and it's metallic, all shiny on the outside." He was now orbiting, circling in the sky with the object reportedly doing the same above him. A few seconds later, he said simply, "It's just vanished." Then, after a brief silence, "The engine is rough idling. I've got it set to 23, 24, and the thing is coughing." His final transmission came at 7:12 p.m. local time. He told the controller he was still intending to reach King Island, and then he added, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." 17 seconds of open microphone followed. In that time, a series of unusual pulsed noises were recorded, and then nothing. The transmission ended. When the plane failed to reach King Island at 7:30 p.m, authorities began immediately coordinating a search. Over the following days, a joint effort between the Royal Australian Air Force, civilian pilots and maritime vessels covered hundreds of square kilometres across the Bass Strait. They found nothing. Despite ideal weather conditions and extensive search grid, not a single piece of aircraft or Frederick Valentich was ever recovered. The official investigation concluded that the aircraft had likely crashed into the sea, but with no wreckage and no visual confirmation of an impact, the report was ultimately inconclusive. Valentich's last confirmed location was near Cape Otway. From there, based on his airspeed and timing, investigators estimated a likely crash area somewhere southeast of Cape Marengo, between 3 and 12 nautical miles offshore. But pinpointing an exact position was impossible. His final moments were spent orbiting, or circling at around 4,500 feet, possibly confused, possibly disorientated. The object he described, if it existed, left no radar trace. And despite hours of audio being reviewed, and the full transcript being made public, the only sounds captured in the final transmission were engine noise and that strange rhythmic pulsing. With no breakthroughs, the rescue effort was terminated indefinitely on the 25th of October, 4 days later. In the years that followed, rumours and recollections began to surface. Stories of strange lights seen over the coast that night. Sightings that never made it into the official report. But one of the most detailed accounts came from a man referred to as Ken Hansen, a pseudonym used in a 1998 investigation published by the Journal of Scientific Exploration. According to his account, Hansen had been driving east along Barnum River Road, just inland from Apollo Bay, with his 2 nieces in the car. It was shortly after sunset and the sky was already dark. His niece, sitting in the front passenger seat, was the first to spot something unusual in the sky. 2 sets of lights, one directly above the other. Hansen initially assumed they were just aircraft lights, but when he looked more closely, he noticed something strange. The lower set of lights appeared consistent with a small plane, red and white navigation lights, spaced like those on a Cessna. But above it was a second object, circular, green and much larger. He described the green light as travelling just behind and above the smaller aircraft, as though it was pacing it. According to his account, the 2 moved steadily across the sky before disappearing behind the hills to the southeast. He heard no sound. The total sighting from first glance to disappearance lasted just over 90 seconds. At the time, Hansen didn't report what he'd seen. He told his wife, she didn't believe him. He told his co-workers. They believed the aircraft part, but not the rest. Years later, after casually mentioning the story to a local policeman, it eventually made its way to Frederick Valentich's father. From there, it was passed on to investigators. It remains one of the only ground-based sightings that appears to match the pilot's own description. But because the testimony surfaced 20 years after the fact, and was never part of the original investigation, its evidentiary value is limited. Still, what Hansen described is eerily consistent with Valentich's final words. Investigators tried to reconstruct what may have happened in the final minutes of the flight. Valentich's last confirmed position was just south of Cape Otway at 4,500 feet. From there, he was meant to follow a straight course towards King Island, using a non-directional beacon as his navigational reference. But his radio exchanges suggest he never made it that far. By 7:10 p.m, just 4 minutes after the first report of the unidentified object, he was orbiting, turning in circles and trying to make sense of what was happening around him. His descriptions were specific: a long shape, green lights, a metallic surface. He said it was hovering above him, and at one point claimed it had vanished entirely, only to reappear a minute later from a different direction. Then came engine trouble. He reported rough idling and coughing, indications that his aircraft was losing power. But even during this, his radio transmissions remained strong and consistent, suggesting he was still airborne and within line of sight range of Melbourne. That implies he had not yet descended below 3,000 feet. Based on his reported speed, altitude and timing, analysts plotted a likely trajectory that placed the aircraft somewhere between 3 and 12 nautical miles southeast of Cape Marengo. That region of Bass Strait is shallow by oceanic standards, just 50 to 70 metres deep, but the conditions below are anything but calm. Oceanographic modelling shows that the currents in this part of the Bass Strait are complex and fast moving. Tidal swell enters from both the east and west and collides in the middle, creating turbulent flows and unpredictable surface movement. Assuming the aircraft did enter the water, the lightweight aluminium structure of the Cessna would not have sunk quickly. It may have remained afloat long enough to drift. Debris could have travelled far before eventually slipping below the surface, or it may have sunk in a location too remote or too deep to be discovered by the limited search resources available at the time. No wreckage has ever been confirmed. No fuselage, fabric or flotation gear has ever been recovered except for one small piece discovered 5 years later in 1983. It had washed up on Flinders Island, more than 300 kilometres from the area where Valentich was last known to be. The part was a fiberglass Cessna 182L engine cowl flap, and investigators at the time said it was consistent with the type used on Valentich's model. However, a lack of a serial number resulted in this find being inconclusive. In the absence of any wreckage or a confirmed crash site, no definitive conclusion has ever been reached about what actually happened to Frederick Valentich. The official Department of Transportation investigation, published in 1982, listed the cause of the disappearance as unknown. It did not attempt to explain what Valentich may have seen in the sky, nor did it speculate on the object he described. It's due to this mysterious and open-ended nature of the incident that over time people have drawn their own conclusions and theories of what happened that night. Flying under visual flight rules, Valentich was navigating across open water after sunset, with little to no horizon and no ground lights to orient by. In such conditions, it's easy to see how an inexperienced pilot could fall victim to spatial disorientation. He may have entered a gradual descending turn thinking he was orbiting and mistaking his own lights, stars, or distant reflections for another object. Others have speculated that he may have been flying upside down and seeing his lights reflected in the water above him. Ultimately, Frederick hit the water without knowing what was happening. Whilst this seems a likely explanation, despite the difficult conditions, Frederick responded to air traffic control clearly, gave his altitude, and was able to describe the object in specific terms: a long shape, metallic, green light, and a hovering behaviour. If he was disorientated, he certainly didn't sound confused. His reports were structured, consistent, and unambiguous. Further, the engine of the Cessna relied on a gravity-fed fuel system from the wing tanks. It can't sustain inverted flight for more than a few moments, and Frederick remained airborne for minutes after first describing the object. Some have suggested that Frederick Valentich staged the entire incident, a disappearance designed to create mystery. The theory begins with inconsistencies in his story. He told Melbourne Flight Services he was flying to King Island to collect friends. But what I haven't mentioned yet is that he also told his family and his girlfriend something entirely different: that he was going to King Island to buy crayfish. They also recalled he'd said he'd be back by 7:30 p.m, which simply wasn't possible given when he took off. Add to that the fact that he never requested runway lighting to be activated at King Island, something any pilot arriving near dusk would have arranged. To me, that strongly suggests he never intended to land there at all. Frederick was a known UFO enthusiast. His father later confirmed that he believed in extraterrestrial life and had developed a fixation with aircraft disappearances over the Bass Strait. Some theorists argue that he used this belief and his knowledge of past sightings to script a dramatic final transmission that would leave a lasting impression. Given the structured pacing of his radio calls, the vivid descriptions and the eerie silence at the end, this theory gains weight as a deliberate performance, a story engineered to be remembered. In one version, he created the illusion of a crash and quietly disappeared. In another, he miscalculated and his plan ended the same way as the first theory, in the sea. But with all that said, there's still no evidence that he had the means or the opportunity to fake a disappearance. He would have needed to land unseen, abandon the aircraft and vanish, all without help, planning, or a trace. No investigation has ever uncovered anything to support that. And if this really was a hoax, it didn't bring him attention. It ended in absolute silence. Building on the hoax theory, some suggest a darker possibility, that the flight was intended not as a disappearance, but as an ending. Valentich had faced a string of setbacks in his short aviation career. He had failed several of his commercial pilot theory exams, some more than once. He had been reprimanded for flying into restricted airspace and been involved in low-flying incidents. And when he applied to the Royal Australian Air Force, his application was rejected. By 20, he had invested heavily in a future that wasn't materialising. Some believed this flight, made under false pretenses and with no passengers, no destination arrangements and no runway lighting, was a final act. That the UFO narrative, like the flight plan, was a carefully crafted misdirection. A way to disappear not as a failed pilot, but as part of a story that would outlast him. The pattern fits, but the evidence doesn't quite close the gap. There was no direct evidence that Valentich intended to take his own life. No note, no farewell, no testimony from friends or family suggesting he was in emotional distress. His voice in the recording was steady, not fatalistic. He reported what he saw, responded to questions, and declared his intention to reach King Island. Whether that was sincere or a final act of misdirection remains unknown. Then there are theories that look well beyond conventional understanding. Frederick Valentich believed he was not alone in the sky that night. He described an object that didn't behave like any aircraft he knew. It hovered, it vanished, it returned. He even said it's not an aircraft. At the time, it was easy to dismiss. The words of a young, inexperienced pilot under stress. But he wasn't the only one who saw something strange that night. Across southern Victoria, multiple eyewitnesses reported unusual lights in the sky. Some described them as green, others said that they moved erratically or appeared to hover silently over the coastline. These accounts came from areas along or near Valentich's flight path, including Apollo Bay and Cape Otway. As we've already covered, Ken Hansen clearly described a small aircraft flying beneath a much larger green light, seen just after sunset. None of these sightings were verified by radar. No physical evidence was recovered, but taken together they suggest Valentich may not have been the only person who saw something that couldn't be explained. Could it have been a misidentified celestial object, the rising planet Venus, a weather balloon, or light reflecting off clouds? Could it have been a military aircraft flying without a transponder and unannounced? Or was it something from another world? No known theory involving weather, celestial events, or hallucination fully accounts for the detail of his observations, the tone of his voice, or the length of the encounter. And the sound captured in the final 17 seconds of open mic, a pulsed metallic rhythm, has never been explained. There is no data, no photographic evidence, and no independent confirmation. All we have are reports, a voice, and a mystery that hasn't aged out of relevance. Whatever Frederick Valentich saw that night, if it was real, perhaps it was never supposed to be seen. Most disappearances leave behind questions. This one left behind something worse: doubt. There was no wreckage, no body, no confirmed final location. Just fragments. A flight plan, a recording, and a pilot describing something no one could understand. You can question his judgment, doubt what he believed he saw, or speculate on why he was really flying that night. But none of it resolves what happened, or why nothing has ever been found. And maybe that's the hardest part to accept, that for all the theories and explanations, the truth might be something we can't get to, something just out of reach. A moment of contact, a moment of confusion, a moment that ended everything and explained nothing. What do you think happened over the Bass Strait that night? Let me know in the comments.